until somebody does something sick.
So Joel, Gagnon on your left-hand side, Kevin Clock, he's on the right. And yeah, so many creatures in the matchup are back heavy, whether it's Frostburn Weird or Night Veil Spectre or Cloudfin Raptor. The board has a habit of getting bogged down, and then you're just waiting on Master of Waves or Thassa to break things open.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a match with a fair bit of big butt involved. Temple of Enlightenment, starting it off. Both players generally like to have all their land come into play on tap so they can curve out. However, they don't really have the greatest mana curve, so there's often times to just play the tap lands.
It is the biggest cost, certainly, of playing the Splash White build. This is a tempo-oriented deck. It's about playing stuff on time. Comes into play tap lands can be a pretty big cost.
Right, and here we see 2 Cloudfin Raptors. So doing things a little out of order, but I mean, next turn, we're looking at a Frostburn Weird, or if Kevin draws a land, possibly another Raptor for the full-on Stormcrow Armada. Which is much better against the Scrib Sprites here. I mean, if you're going to send a flying man in,
right,
Stormcrow is what you want.
It rules the day.
Oh, absolutely. And it looks like we do have Nathan Holt would be proud. We're talking some serious triple Stormcrow.
This is one of those explosive Blue Devotion starts we talk about so often.
Absolutely. He's using all of his mana every turn so that by turn 3, he has committed 4 different creatures to the board with a power greater than 0. Finally.
Joel with Detention Sphere in hand. Do not believe he has untapped white mana this turn.
Yeah, next turn is going to be a nice turn when the 3 Stormcrows have to go to detention. In the meantime, Joel just looking to advance his board. Taps down the Frostburn Weird because, you know, Tidebinder does that kind of stuff.
It is certainly a weird element of the deck is there's so many hybrid mana creatures, so random protection from color or ultimate price doesn't work.
It's a weird element of the deck, huh? Is that so, Louise? Okay.
I wasn't even trying that. That just comes naturally to me, man.
All right, we've got a follow-up in the form of Frostburn Weird. These Cloudfin Raptors are now very, very, very angry, but not as angry as Kevin's going to be when he finds out the Detention Sphere is what's going on. Do you think there's any chance Joel's paranoid of the rapid hybridization?
Well, he has a Judge's Familiar to protect himself from that. So I think,
there you go.
I think he'll be okay.
Very sneaky.
Joel's just going to take this on the chin here.
Judge's Familiar is like, it's like having Counterbalance and Sensei's Divining Top in play.
And Entreat the Angels, all in one card.
It basically locks the whole thing up. Kevin with a Judge's Familiar of his own, but that's not going to stop this little sequence.
So there's a big Detention Sphere taking care of 3 Cloudfin Raptors.
And another Cloudfin Raptor wisely coming late to the party.
Thassa and Detention Sphere in hand for Kevin. So some good tools to work with.
Yeah, I mean, he still has a Thassa, and she is completely turned on, if you know what I mean. She'll be able to hit for 5 a turn, putting Joel on a 3-turn clock. And with that Detention Sphere hitting all the Cloudfin Raptors, he doesn't actually have an answer to Thassa, and his chances of racing are actually not the greatest.
So there is the Thassa. Devotion not quite on just yet. Oh, sorry, no, that Weird is still in play. No, Thassa's good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Fully powered up and turned on. Judge's Familiar getting in there because the 2 Frostburn Weirds are enough to keep Thassa satisfied.
I would imagine we're going to see a trade here from Joel.
Yeah, he doesn't want to take any incidental damage because reducing the clock from 3 turns to 2 would be a real problem.
So Joel slightly ahead on the board here, but behind the gun.
I was going to say, I think he's actually behind. That Thassa is so big. I think that unless Joel, you know, changes the game pretty quickly here, he's going to lose the race.
Well, here it is. There's Master of Waves. And that's going to bring along 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elementals.
All right. Joel back in the driver's seat.
That's a lot of them.
Ah, the detention sphere. He points out he wants another one.
His 7 tokens. And the Raptor across for 2.
Now, Kevin's going to need an answer to Master of Waves this turn, or he's just dead on board, right?
Yeah, he's taking so much on the way back.
That's 14, 16, 18. Yeah, I mean, now he does have Detention Sphere, so he has the answer in his hand.
And there's a Master on top of his deck too, so...
He decides he does want Z-Master. Of course, the problem with this line is that it means that Thassa cannot get through for Schurz this turn. He can still attack with the Thassa, but Joel has the option to chump with the Frostburn Weird if he wants. Interesting. What do you think about the getting in there with the Frostburn Weird? Well, that just bounces off of either one.
Yeah, it seems if Joel's in a position to already chump block, it's essentially free for him to block the Weird. And that might leave Kevin taking quite a bit of damage on the way back.
And if he wants, Joel can actually double block the Weird. No, that doesn't. No, he doesn't have the mana. So either way, that block is just free. Maybe he's just trying to entice Joel into making a mistake.
It still seems, you know, this game has turned into a pure damage race. There is some risk with not having a blocker back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's just giving up like 3 points of damage. But maybe this is his plan. He just wants to entice Joel to attack. I don't know. So no chumps. Joel drops to 7. No fear about the fact that he is dead on board to any untapped land by Kevin. And he knows that Kevin kept his card.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a tough spot because a chump block there means you no longer have sufficient devotion for the Thassa in your hand, or if you chump block with Tidebinder Mage, that means the Frostburn Weird that Kevin has gets unlocked. So.
Well, no, you'd have to chump with the Weird.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Tidebinder can still block that the Frostburn Weird himself because Kevin doesn't have the mana. But unfortunately, what he does have is a clock.
There is Thassa. Now, when Devotion is sufficient, Thassa does count as a creature when it comes into play, so it does evolve the Clothman Raptor. One of the numerous subtle nuances of the...
And the thing is now, with that Thassa down, Joel is threatening to win on board. He has lethal on board, and Kevin, I think, locked himself out by keeping that Master Waves because the Master does nothing. And now he doesn't have a land.
Yeah, he could have just scryed to the bottom. Yep. Maybe he's still thinking about it.
Ah, yeah, he can scry to the bottom now. I mean, at this point, he has to because he's just dead on board because the Raptor flies in for 3. The Tidebinder and Thassa are each unblockable, and that's straight up 10 for Xaxes.
Yep.
So he kept last turn, but now he's got a ship and just take a chance and hope he draws an untapped land.
And I didn't mind him keeping last turn, but now things have just shifted. I mean, the Thassa from Joel means that the game has a totally different tenor to it.
Yeah, I still wonder when you're in a spot where you have your opponent, you know, dead on board next turn if you draw a land, and you have 2 looks at it. I don't know, it's tough.
The big thing here is that Tidebinder Mage got to connect last turn. Kevin on the previous turn, sending in everything, opened up the door for that Tidebinder across for 2, and now he's potentially looking at exactly lethal.
Yeah, he's paying the price. This is right here. This is literally greed in action. Although that Judge's Familiar is huge, that's game winning. You know, if everything goes okay, because he can actually chump the Raptor. Joel doesn't have enough to make 3 creatures unblockable. So as long as he plays his cards right here, I mean, he potentially can live, right? I mean, if Joel just attacks with everything, you can block. If Thassa is unblockable and the Mutavault just gets in there, he 1, 2, 3.
Well, an untapped land does it for Joel too, right? He just makes Thassa, the Raptor, and the Tidebinder Mage all unblockable, and that's exactly 10.
Yep. Now, if he makes just Thassa unblockable and attacks with the Mutavault, he has 4 attackers. Kevin can actually block the Raptor and and the Frostburn Weird and take exactly 9, going to 1. So if Joel does not have an untapped land, he is dead to the board because of that because of the judge's familiar. What a crazy game.
Yeah.
This one is down to the wire. Now, is there any sequence in which he can turn off Thassa's Devotion? I mean, the 2 weirds is 4, the familiar makes 5, the tension sphere is 6, and Thassa is 7. Even if the judge's familiar goes away, he's still totally fine. He would need to kill the judge's familiar and the Frostburn weird in order to get rid of the Devotion.
Yeah. I mean, if he draws Cyclonic Rift and bounces the Thassa, then if Kevin doesn't find a land on top, then he can't play Thassa and activate in the same turn. So he sends it to the bottom, presumably looking for a 6th land. Is instead Tidebinder Mage.
Tidebinder Mage does not stop the Thassa that is looming doom here. Now, does he have a Bident in his hand?
Yes.
Because he could always play the Bident, attack, draw some cards, and look for his 1 rapid hybridization. Or a land and a Cyclonic Rift.
I don't think Rapid Hybridization provides him very much here.
In terms of just turning off Devotion. It is exactly enough because the judge's familiar will have to chump in combat.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yep. All right, here comes the squad.
So Kevin, in a little bit of a little test here, will he block the judge's familiar? Unfortunately, Joel is a mana short of being able to pump the Frostburn Weird's Fire Breathing. This knocks Kevin to 1.
All right, there's the game 1 handshake there.
What a crazy one.
Kevin clock up a game.
Yeah, absolutely. Joel, a time traveler, resident player. Time Traveler is one of the big stories here. I mean, we talk about RIW. Time Traveler is another key story to the area. A lot of the people going into both stores as well.
Oh, I thought you meant literally someone who could travel through time.
Well, that's also true, but that's just well known.
Oh, okay.
No, Joel is, he was sent here from the future, and in the future, a lot of people continue to go to Time Travelers in Southeast Michigan.
Yeah, I thought that you meant that he's a time traveler. Like he looked in the future, knows that he is going to lose the match, and was offering the handshake after game 1 to get it out of the way.
Take the draw.
Moving on to the sideboard, I have Joel's in front of me here. Blind Obedience, Domestication, Cyclonic Rift, Dispel, Dissolve, 3 Gainsay, a Negate, a Rapid Hybridization, a Jace Architect of Thought, 2 copies of Jace Memory Depth, a Glare of Heresy, and a Revoke Existence. What do you think is the best play in the mirror match? Clearly, things that can kill Thassa are at a premium. He definitely wants the Revoke Existence.
Yeah, particularly when you know that Revoke also hits Detention Sphere, which is obviously big here. I mean, Gainsay is a stone cold killer. That's the primary thing. He's got 3 Gainsays, which he absolutely is going to love. Domestication's Joel's other big trump. It's not out of this world or anything, but it's first of all, it's just real good on Night Veil Spectre, but the place where it gets fantastic, where it's actually just awesome, is if you ever need to do anything tactical, like, I mean, as you see, these games are of inches, and it can provide you with, it can effectively stop 2 different attackers at the same time by taking 1 and possibly even turning off Devotion while providing an extra blocker.
Yeah,
it's a very temporary way to steal a Thassa, but
it's pretty compelling that this feels like a matchup, the Blue Devotion Mirror and Blue Splash White Devotion, where there's a lot of preemptive chump blocking that potentially goes on in the game. Because the threat of Thassa makes it so that you may not get to chump block down the line. Right. People need to pick their spots and get in their blocks when they can. You can't wait all day.
And now I actually think Kevin Clock has the upper hand by a small bit anyway after sideboard, because he has access to 3 Domestications and 2 Revoke Existences. He has definitely come prepared.
That's quite a bit. How do you feel about Curse of the Swine in the mirror match?
Curse of the Swine's kind of wild. I don't have enough experience with it, but I would guess that it's actually fairly good. Getting rid of all of their Devotion, completely shutting it off, and getting rid of their flyers. Plus, there just aren't very many answers to Master of Waves. If you don't have an answer to Master of Waves, it will just win the game single-handedly sometimes, Particularly since in these games, Master Waves generally is representing somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 to 18 power.
Yeah, the decks are not very good at killing each other's permanents, of course, and so the devotion count just builds up. Master Waves is a Stone Cold killer every time it comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. Do both players have one? No, it looks like only Kevin. Kevin has the one Curse of the Swine, another Reed Duke favorite card. On the other side, it seems like Joel mostly just, the big advantage Joel has is 3 gainsays. So I take it back. He actually does have some pretty nice weapons here.
And there's 0 copies in Kevin Clock's sideboard?
0. Yeah, 0, which means that Kevin is going to sort of be playing as the aggressor. You know, he's got Domestication for some real nice tempo, Revoke Existence to get rid of Detention Sphere, whereas Joel is going to be a little more reactive.
Yeah.
Should be interesting. Either way, though, the matchup is so tight on so like tempo oriented, so tactical. It's not really just a strategic battle. It's much more of a finding a spot so that you win the race by 1 turn or 1 damage, or you give yourself 1 extra draw, or you have 1 extra mana. You know.
A game of inches, and very much about what's going on the board and the numbers that are in play on the board.
Yeah. The numbers of strength that each person, you know, the amount of power each person is representing, the amount of mana symbols on each side of the board, the number of flyers each player has, the number of land each player has access to. What I want to see is a good old-fashioned Night Veil Spectre duel.
Oh, sure.
That's where things get real wild. Both players playing blue splash white, but they both have kind of a very different sort of mana base. Not very different, I guess, but kind of a different implementation where Joel has the minimalist, just 4 Temple, 4 Hallowed Fountain, whereas Kevin Clock actually has access to both Azorius Guildgate and Godless Shrine, so that he more reliably has access to his white mana. What's interesting is that even though Kevin has quite a bit more white mana, Joel has some exotic white sideboard cards such as Blind Obedience, a card not traditionally seen in Devotion decks.
Although, in fairness, you really only need the 1 planes, and then everything else just works. You're casting all your blue spells, and your white mana left over can be used for store triggers.
Oh, plus the main reason you're bringing it in is so that haste creatures come into play tapped.
Especially Mistcutter Hydra. That's the big one.
Yeah, when the red-green deck has Mistcutter Hydra, Stormbreath Dragon, possibly even Xenagos, all that kind of stuff. So it looks like Joel is going to go ahead and go to 6.
Kevin with a lot of Raptors in that hand.
Yeah, I mean, worked for him last game. Very nearly didn't. You know, it was real down to the wire, but managed to pull it out after the triple Raptor opening gives him just enough pressure to win the game.
Even though they got hit by Detention Spear.
Yeah, with the old 3-for-1.
But the damage and the tempo matters a lot in this matchup, especially because Thassa's in play.
Yeah, what I like is the psychological edge gained by Kevin by that kind of reckless Frostburn weird that made it so that he was dead on board until he drew the Judge's Familiar. That way Joel feels something, you know?
Right, he feels it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stings a little worse.
You got to set yourself up for game 2 to get the advantage. So we're going to see Cloudfin Raptor number 1. Currently at 0-1, half the card Ornithopter would be in this spot, and as a result, Judge's Familiar is going to be able to beat down unimpeded.
And infinitely times more expensive.
Oh, a second Judge's Familiar comes down. Yeah, I mean, Judge's Familiar is infinitely more expensive, but on the other hand, it is only more expensive by 1 mana. A second Cloudfin Raptor, and yes, the Judge's Familiar. The mediocre beats are beginning in earnest.
In a world of flying men, the Stormcrow is king.
Yeah, but the Stormcrow is kind of just king anyway. That's just kind of a known issue. Night Veil Spectre comes down. A lot of unusual power and toughness cards in this deck. I love it. It really brings out the best of Cloudfin Raptor.
Yeah. You get Night Veil Spectres and Frostburn Weirds. You go all the way up.
Yeah, Thassa even.
Yep. So, Kevin with the choice between Thassa and Detention Sphere. Which one do you like this turn?
It's interesting because the Detention Sphere makes sure that he is ahead, whereas Thassa, I like Detention Sphere because like the Thassa, the problem is that it doesn't trigger the 2 Raptors. You've lost out on that potential pump. And if it gets Detention Sphered, you're starting to fall pretty far behind from that Night Veil Spectre. This nice conservative approach means the next turn Thassa will come down as a creature and pump the 1 remaining Raptor.
All right, so you see an alpha strike here by Kevin with his various 1-power flyers. Joel's going to take the opportunity to double block one of the Cloudfin Raptors.
I actually am not sure I even would attack with the Raptors. You lose 1 point of damage, but then you just have a Raptor in play, which next turn is threatening to be 2 points of damage.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that you just make it up on board next turn and get ahead, but it depends on how you want to play it, because he also doesn't want to be exposed to Detention Sphere.
Yeah, I can definitely understand the instinct to cash in a little bit of the board right there.
Yeah, just hedge. Kevin looking for more big plays. Basically just wants anything that costs 3 or more mana.
There is Tidebinder Mage. That's going to evolve the Raptor.
So what do you think about not leading with the Thassa? I mean, he very obviously is playing around Detention Sphere, but do you think you're supposed to play around Detention Sphere here?
He may also be playing around a counterspell, trying to
That's
advance
true.
his board without exposing his best card.
That's fair. Plus, this way he gets the most counters on his Raptor over time.
Yeah.
And it looks like he does have a second Thassa. Doesn't even hesitate.
And that's going to evolve as there's the Detention Sphere in play alongside the Tidebinder Mage and the Cloudfin Raptor.
Serendip Ifrit gets in there for 3. Joel, a little flooded. The tough thing is that when not only is he flooded, he just doesn't have any permanents laying around. So a lot of his live draws, or a lot of his what would be his best draws, like Thassa and Master Waves, don't really do as much for him here as they would in a lot of other games.
So Thassa being made unblockable, as is the Cloudfin Raptor a little preemptively. So
Yeah,
that's
why
8.
bother having him activate the Mutavault? Doesn't matter here. Joel on a 1-turn clock needs a detention sphere right now. Or a Revoke Existence. You know, he's got one of those in his board. That would play.
Revoke would be pretty solid here.
What I'd like is for him to just go into the tank and about 2.5 minutes from now come out with, okay, revoke your Thassa.
Looks like he's picked up Domestication.
Not bad. I mean, it turns off the devotion, right? By
Yeah.
stealing the Tidebinder?
I believe that
Or even the Thassa. I mean, even the Cloudfin Raptor, right?
well, Kevin does have a Detention Sphere left over in his hand, so that's going to make this elementary.
Yeah.
Going to do a quick scry here, a Domestication of his own.
Just playing around, you know, what happens if he's got a gain save from my detention sphere?
Yeah. Moving pretty hastily there.
And this is the game. So Kevin Clock wins round 9 to go to 8-1, where presumably he will he aspires to draw next round into top 8. Joel at 7-2 with Blue-White Devotion.